Hello and welcome to Raider HQ After Dark. I'm your host, Raider. And in this rambly little video, what I'd like to talk to you about is the role of the Raider, the RVSR, the rating VSR, and what their role is in the process. Now, it might seem pretty straightforward as to what their role is in the process, but I recently had a very good conversation with another content creator about their perceived role as to what the Raider does. And I'll tell you what, and there's nothing wrong with what they said. I mean, their perception is, fairly common among the veteran community, the YouTube community, but it doesn't necessarily match reality. And it really weirds me out to the point that I felt like should do a video just rambling about the perception of what the Raiders do and the reality of what the Raiders do. And this might disappoint a lot of you because your bad guy doesn't really have much to say about anything. So let's get into this. So the first thing that me and the content creator were talking about was the fact that who decides whether or not you're service connected for something. So we're just talking about you're claiming something, it has never been claimed before, you're asking for it to be service connected. Well, they believe that the Raider makes that determination, which is not actually accurate. The examiner makes that determination 95, 97% of the time. Now, in instances where there's like BDD claims or you're filing a claim within 1 year of your release from active duty date, or let's say it's even a presumptive condition, you would think that the Raider determines whether or not you are service connected. And the fact of the matter is, they don't. The examiner doesn't make the determination, but neither does the Raider. The Raider just simply goes, is element 1 satisfied and can I point to it? Element 1 being the current diagnosis. Is there a current diagnosis? Yes or no? No, they are denied. There's no decision there. Like, that's the absence of decision. It is either yes or no based upon what is sitting in front of them. They don't get to weigh anything like an examiner does. There's no competent deductive reasoning associated with it. It is literally the computer could almost do that. So, and then they do it for element 2, for the theory for service connection that's applied. And if all the theories for service connection are missing one of the two elements, element 1 or element 2, in the case of a presumptive condition, a BDD claim, or a claim filed within 1 year, which is the Raiders making the rating, it's either yes or no. Is the evidence there? Is the evidence sitting in front of them and can they point to it? That is basically it. And if they cannot, then you're denied. And if they can, then you're granted. There's no big tug of war. I see a lot of people quoting the balance of evidence and the equipoise and the the probative value of things. Yes or no? That's what it boils down to. And that's why a lot of videos ago I said, look, there is no tug of war. There's no tie. The tie goes to the veteran. There's no tie. There's hardly ever a tie. It's either yes or no. There's no tie. You can't both have a diagnosis and not have a diagnosis. Now, what happens if there's conflicting evidence? Well, if the Raider should make a determination with conflicting evidence that hasn't been resolved, then that is a quality error. That is a clear and unmistakable error or a duty to assist error. Unless they can point to the thing that makes them say yes or no, they have to defer back and go, well, hey, look, unless it's clear cut, like the examiner's like, look, there's no diagnosis here. Then that's clear cut, and the Raider will go, nope, element 1 is not satisfied, denied. But if they go, well, there's no evidence of a diagnosis, but they do have these symptoms which have persisted over 6 months. Well, if that's like, well, wait a minute, you just said that there was no diagnosis, but they have the clear symptoms that could themselves be a diagnosis, I'm going to defer it back, and I want you to finalize that answer to say, are these symptoms acute or transitory, or are they a chronic disability themselves? And if so, please weigh in. That's all the Raider's doing. Now, I hate to pull the curtain back, but that's basically it. I mean, the majority of the job is data entry. That's why, like, raters that have a good process on keeping track of the laws, rules, and regulations associated with the theories to make sure that they're checking boxes. Okay, this theory has 6 boxes I need to check in order to make sure that I have satisfied my legal requirements to, you know, whether I can grant or deny. It's that simple. So, it sometimes kind of weirds me out how persistent the thought process is that the rater makes, the rater's the bad guy, which they can be, right? Like, the process that I explained beforehand is an objective review of the evidence. Now, can a rater subjectively, like, if they disagree with something on a personal level, can they lean in and abuse their power to try to affect the outcome? Technically, yes. Technically, they can. They can send it back for a review, and they can word the review in such a way that it could influence the examiner. Yes, they could do that. Hopefully, that's the exception and not the rule. But yes, they can do that. They can influence things passively to try, to get a different outcome. But there are some instances where raters get to make the absolute final decision. And we'll say, like, aid in attendance. We'll say migraine 50% rating decisions. They get the final say. Uh, IU, individual unemployability. The rater gets the final say. But and this is why I'm glad that the raters don't get to make very many decisions, because when they do, oh, buddy, get the popcorn, because it is usually just a cluster of nonsense, because they can just kind of do whatever they want and they're not qualified. Like, the rating force is not medical professionals. The rating force is not individuals who have an expertise in this. The individuals, the raters can't even read the recommendations half the time from the medical examiners in instances like uh, aid in attendance and TDIU, or individual unemployability. Like, they don't know what that means. They don't know what the barriers, like, how significantly impairing the barriers are. How do you weigh that? So in that situation, there's no equipoise either, because they either go by what the examiner said and kind of just go, sure, I just agree with the examiner that they say that the veteran has, the veteran's old job was sedentary in nature, and the VA examiner says that the veteran can do sedentary activities. Fair enough. That makes sense. Cool. They just go with the examiner because it's safer to go with the examiner, because raters typically rate as to not get an error. Because if you rate to follow your feelings and your heart, and you go against the manual and you go against the whatever, it might not catch you today, it might not catch you tomorrow, but it will catch you quality wise, and you will not be working there if you don't follow the rules. So the rules, is what is the path of least resistance to not get an error? And that's the behavior of the majority of raters, is they want to, if QRT says that I have to check 10 boxes in order to not get an error, then those 10 boxes are going to be checked. That's why sometimes you don't, like, that's why the short form narrative exists, is because they don't have to explain themselves, because there's nothing to explain. The behaviors done by the rater, and I'm not making a cop out for them or anything like that. I'm just saying that there's a perception of that the rater is, doing all this complex stuff, that it's a complex job. The complexity is making sure that you account for all the regulations in the current context of the thing that you're doing. That's it. Once you get that down, the job is one of the easiest jobs I've ever done. Like, it's not complex. What's complex is trying to understand that 7,000 different people wrote 7,000 different things that overlap with each other. If you can figure out the pattern, and you can have a good process for approaching each thing individually within the confines of the theories that apply to it, it's on rails. You just have to make sure, like another part of that is you as a rater, you got to make sure that you're updating your process as changes happen. That's why I'm in the M21 manual every single day. I wish, now guys, I'll be honest with you. I wish it was so simple that I could just follow the CFR. Do you know how easy that would be if I just had to follow the CFR? I mean, I wouldn't know what to do. I mean, because it doesn't tell you how to do anything, but the CFR never changes hardly. So following a CFR would be great, but you got to follow the manual, and the manual changes constantly. So, and that's the challenge, right? Like if we're going to look at the real challenge of being a rater is keeping up with all of the changes and adapting your process. You've got to be adaptable to it. People that are rigid and they're inflexible typically don't do well in the job because they can't adapt to the constant change. And that goes double for like QRT because QRT has to adapt because they're the ones that are telling you what to do with these constant changes. So they've got to be able to, if they're good at their job, they know how to look like 3 steps ahead and see what the consequences of it are, kind of, and to teach to that level, teach 3 steps outwards. So not only would you do this, but it could affect these 2 other things here. So be mindful of that. But once again, QRT doesn't do that. So to the detriment of everybody else. Like I said, it's going to be a ramble. So circling back, like the role of the rater, you know, it seems like such a big deal and it seems like such a complex thing. And if abused, it can be as maddening as people have experienced. Like if I wanted to be a jackass, I could be a jackass and say, you know what? No, I'm not accepting your private DBQ, because that's another area where they get to weigh the evidence based upon the credibility and authenticity. But typically those are the VSRs that are doing that. The VSR will discount the private DBQ before the rater even touches it. So, or if they do say it's a good one and it gets sent to the rater can discount it. But typically it's the VSR that has first hands-on, first ability to discount your private DBQs and private medical opinions. So some of that hate and disdain, which is not invalid, because I don't think that they should be discounting the private DBQs as much as they are. But a lot of that falls between the VSRs and the raters. It's not just the rater doing everything. And I understand that the internal workings don't matter, but at least familiarizing yourself with the process can allow you to put, the frustration and the anger in the right spot. If you were denied because there's no element 3, there's no medical nexus or link, that has nothing to do with the rater. That has to do with the examiner. The examiner said medically, I've reviewed all of your evidence and there is no link between A and B. Now, if the VSR did not send them all the evidence, then your frustration should be pointed at the VSR. And that's part of the reason why I tell you guys time and time again, if you get a negative examination, like something bad about the examination, and they didn't use key evidence, the rating narrative doesn't have to list all of your evidence. It's not legally required unless the conditions are required to have a long form narrative. In the M21, there's a section in the M21 that says that. But if not, then the short form narrative, they don't have to list that out in the evidence section. So that itself is not a clear and unmistakable error or a duty to assist error or anything like that. But if you go to the VSO and the VSO, and I don't understand why VSOs don't know this for the most part, if they go into the VBMS documents section and they look for exam request, like literally the words exam request, the exam request has the evidence that was submitted to the examiner. So every single VSO should be doing that. You should hold your VSOs who have VBMS access accountable to double checking the evidence that was submitted, because there's something called a document ID that's listed in there. Your VSO can put that into VBMS and they can see every single document that was submitted to that examiner. So your frustrations sometimes can be misplaced, because it's not the rater who potentially caused the outcome. It can be the VSR by not giving all of the evidence to the examiner. It can be by the examiner who came to a different conclusion medically, which is within their wheelhouse. All right. But when it comes to the role of the rater, YouTubers and veterans themselves give way too much credit to what the raters do. The majority of the time, we're just data entry people. Oh, there's 6 boxes checked on your DBQ. Let me mirror those 6 boxes in VBMS. That's I mean, I hate to criminally dilute it down or boil it down to its most basic level, but that's about it. Data entry specialists. Okay. I think it's natural for people. It helps me to understand that there's more teaching to be done about how the process works. If there is misplaced anger and frustration and unreasonable expectations put onto the rater, because raters are not the people that make those decisions 95, 97% of the time. It's the examiners. The examiners are the ones that determine the majority of the outcomes. The raters can sometimes be your lifeline to getting, correcting an injustice or something like that, but it can be rare. Anyway, that's about all I got for you on this one, guys. Rater out.